Good morning. Would like to call the Trotwood-Madison Board of Education Saturday, September 26, 2020 special meeting board retreat to order. Ms. Allen, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Andrews.
Yes.
Mr. Scares.
Yes.
Mrs. Judah Freeman.
Yes.
Mrs. Bozeman.
Yes.
And Ms. Moore.
Yes, the meeting has now been called to order. We are currently back in our Trotwood-Madison Board of Education offices right here at 3594 North Snyder Road here in Trotwood. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public meeting. Vice President Bozeman, will you please lead us in a pledge of allegiance?
Okay, sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I now need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved.
I'll second.
The agenda has been moved in second. Are there any questions, concerns, changes? Okay, being none, Ms. Allen, will you call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Scares.
Yes.
Mrs. Judah Freeman.
Yes.
Mr. Andrews.
Yes.
Mrs. Bozeman.
Yes.
And Ms. Moore.
Yes, the agenda has been adopted. And I want to make a quick statement along the lines of the agenda. I know initially we had an anticipation of possibly having a hand-carried item, but according to our law director and legal counsel and the directive, we are to further discuss that in detail along the lines of the supplementals and at a later date, possibly the next board meeting, get back to that particular item. Next up, number 2, Employee Code of Conduct, and it's presented by Dr. David Broswell. And I'm going to say a little bit about Dr. Broswell, if I may. He can hear us and he can see us and.
I can, President Moore. I can hear
okay.
you and see you.
Okay, yay, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, David Broswell is a retired Arizona state senator, award-winning educator, education researcher, administrator, governing board member, and devoted husband of 31 years. I think what's most important that we need to understand, we have a subject matter expert today to review the Code of Conduct for Trotwood-Madison City Schools. In his current role as the CEO and co-founder of Upslope Solutions, LLC, Dr. Broswell has more than 36 years of experience in educational practice and research. He spent over 2 decades designing curriculum management software and has helped educators plan and focus on standards-driven curriculum management and research-based professional development programs. He's held positions as a teacher, a principal, and chief school district administrator. He was a superintendent in Georgia, North Carolina, South Dakota, and New Mexico. Born in Robbinsville, North Carolina, near the Cherokee-Qualla boundary, Broswell spent more than 10 years as chief school administrator with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. During his tenure, he served as one of 6 administrative negotiators representing the U.S. Department of Interior in contract negotiation with the National Federation of Education Employees. I say all this to say that today is going to be very insightful. I wanted to read, and that's just part of his bio. There's so much more, but I want to let Dr. Broswell dive in because we have a lot of information to cover. It's all regarding the Code of Conduct. Dr. Cosby called me and she said, this is something that we need to have rejuvenated, re-implemented. And again, in Trotwood, we've had a code of conduct for quite a while, for over 10 years. Dr. Broswell, I believe you were involved in that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and that was with Dr. Wagner. However, over the course of 10 years, we've gotten away from actually using the code of conduct and having a system and a protocol in place. So now this is our opportunity to resurrect that. Plus, we've got new board members that we wanted to make sure weighed in and help reestablish the belief and philosophy and values of this school district based on that code of conduct. So I just want to say thank you for being here today. We're excited to have you. I would, if it's okay, let the board members just introduce themselves. I know I sent you some information, but it's good to put faces with names. So we'll do that.
Myra Bozeman.
Vanessa Jeter Freeman.
Norman. Michael Andrews.
And that is our board. Thank you.
Well, good morning from
Good morning.
Phoenix, Arizona. We have gotten through the worst of the weather this summer, and we've had over 15 days of 115-degree temperatures or greater, and now it's kind of cooled off to the low 100s, and we're just excited about that. I'm coming from you 3 hours behind you. It's currently 6:26 or excuse me, 21 a.m. here in Phoenix on a Saturday morning, and the sun is up, just broke the horizon, and beautiful day we're looking at. I want to thank you all for allowing me to interact with you and take a little bit of your very valuable time. I want to make sure that we have interaction that is open, and you feel free to interrupt me at any time. I do have to say, as a side note, I'm looking down on you. Maybe this is what it's like from heaven. I'm not real sure. I can't see your faces real good, but if you would be so kind, if you ask a question, if you just give me your first name. I have your pictures and your names in front of me, thanks to our board president, Moore, and I'd like to be able to just put a face with the questions that are being offered there. We're going to go pretty fast this morning. I like to do that. Let me tell you just a little bit about Upslope, my company. I left the superintendency in the spring of 1993. I did that to come to Phoenix and work with my grandfather's first cousin, who was the founder of Ping Golf Clubs. And my grandfather and he have since passed away, going on 20 years ago. So I really have roots here in Arizona, as well as North Carolina. And as I left education as a result of him asking me to come and work with Ping Golf, I did that because I wanted to start this company in 1993, and it was time. So I began working with Ping, and we had an agreement that he was going to help me start this company, and he kept his word, and he did. And here I am, 26 years later, talking with the board in Trotwood-Madison City Schools. I'd like to go through and let you know a little bit about my background very quickly. I was a teacher for 6 years, a principal for 9 years, 3 years elementary, 3 years middle, 3 years high school, superintendent for 4.5 years. I served 2 governors in my tenure as a paid part-time contracted educational consultant through my company Upslope that was founded in October of 1994 with the help of the founder of Ping Golf and his eldest son. Both have the same namesake, Carson Solheim. And we are now with training and code development. We specialize in helping school districts write customized employee codes of conduct and expected behaviors. And then through my research, we operationalize that on behalf of the board and the superintendent. So it's all districts have board expected behaviors that are detailed in policy. Only 98% of those districts have operationalized that in as far as using technology to give administrators instant access to your board policies and those expected behaviors and conduct. And then from that, it assists the superintendent in running the day-to-day management of the school district. If you think about it, fellow board members, the day-to-day management is the primary role of the superintendent. But if you did not extend to the superintendent your approved board policies of conduct and expected behaviors, then the superintendent would not have any authority to take any action unless that came from the statutes within Ohio Revised Code and or at the federal level. I served 2 governors, as I said, as a paid educational consultant. I also have had the honor as a paid contract through Upslope to serve the Speaker of the House of Arizona for 4 years. And I served 5 years as an elected governing board member of the largest elementary middle school district in the state of Arizona. We have 32 schools, and all of my daughters went to public schools. Rhonda and I we chose to send our children, our 3 daughters, to public school because we wanted to be a part of the solution rather than just sit back and not have any input into that, which we believe is a foundational right throughout this nation to have all children, regardless of socioeconomic status or race, creed, color, the right to access high quality, free public education. That's not to say that we're against charter schools or private schools. It is to say, however, that Rhonda and I both were born in North Carolina in the Smokies, and we wouldn't be where we're at today if it weren't for a good quality public school that we were allowed to go to and caring educators that held our hand and helped our parents mold our character. As I move forward, I served 5 years on the elementary and middle school district governing board. And then I ran as our daughters moved into the high school district. In Arizona, we have elementary, middle school districts and high school districts. I ran for that, and it was one of the top 5 in size high school districts in the state of Arizona. We had 10 districts or 10 high schools and approximately 26,000 students. And I served on the high school district for 4 years. What I'm going to cover with you today is not my opinion. It's very important for me to be able to say to you, and I've had these discussions with Dr. Cosby, and I've had in the last couple days virtually discussions with President Moore and Dr. Cosby on one occasion, and President Moore one-on-one virtually on y'all's behalf to begin to set this up. I'm going to cover with you validated, peer-reviewed research. Now, I've read your bios, and there are intellectuals sitting in this room, and I'm honored to meet you. So I'm going to have a discussion based on an assumption that you all understand the challenges as elected board members in providing the leadership and upholding the highest ethical standards at all times on behalf of the community, the Trotwood-Madison community that elected you to uphold their ethical standards. When we send our kids to a school, whether it be private or public, the number one goal for the majority of us as parents throughout this nation is to know first and foremost that they're safe, that the governing board, as we call them out here, the school board, as you call them there, has our interest at heart, and their ultimate goal is to keep our kids safe first and foremost. The second thing, and the second reason we send our children to public schools and any school, is to make sure that the environment is conducive to learning. And in making sure that the environment is conducive to learning, you and I and Dr. Cosby and your educational staff and many, many thousands of parents and taxpayers understand that we are not, as parents, we might not be best suited for providing instruction to our kids, and that's why we send them to you. Understanding that good instruction requires differentiating instruction, beginning every lesson with review and focus, statement of objective, teacher input, guided practice, closure, making sure that they're following a curriculum map that you have approved that's in line and is making certain that the child, the student, has mastered the prerequisite skills needed to move up through each of the grade levels and each of the subject topics, so that once they are ready to cross that platform and receive a diploma from each of you, if you're the ones handing those out at that school, I remember those days, that you can attest in front of everyone that they have met the requirements as set forth by the great state of Ohio, that they are prepared and they will be successful in their endeavor to become a productive member of society. How do we do that? We do that based on the research that I was fortunate enough to do when I did my dissertation work. I asked my college review board as I was getting ready to announce my topic and hypothesis for my quantitative dissertation for special permission to be able to work on the area that I do for a living, the topic that we are here today to discuss. I was so pleased and honored when they gave me permission to do that. And I went forward from that permission and developed a hypothesis based on the review of over 250 validated literature reviews that studied the confidence level of principals in school districts throughout the nation regarding their type of management style and why they adopted that management style working with their employees. I asked them, in essence, what kind of manager are you? And I gave them 4 choices based on the research. Are you a Theory X manager? Theory X meaning, are you the type of person that says, I'm the principal, you do it my way, and if you don't like it, there's the door? Or are you a Theory Y manager? Are you one that's more apt to get everybody in a room and talk through it and reach consensus, and everybody decide on what the solution is, and you become more of a participant than a bold, a leader directing what happens? Or are you a combination of both of those types, depending on the day and the situation? And then finally, I asked them, are you a defensive manager, meaning that you pick who you're going to interact with, how you're going to interact with them, when you're going to interact with them, and if a violation occurs, you'll decide the level of consequence based on your own personal ethical beliefs. I sent out invitations through the Association of School Administrators in 3 states: Arizona, which is a right to work state; Ohio, which is a bargaining unit state; and Kentucky, which used to be bargaining and now has only 2 districts left that are bargaining, and the rest of the state has moved to right to work. And I asked them, what type of manager are you and why? The results I got back were quite understandable from the literature reviews that I had been studying, and that was 77% of principals, over 4,500 responses on the online survey, indicated that they manage defensively. When I asked them why they felt the need to manage defensively, meaning that they would determine who they're going to hold accountable, how they're going to hold accountable, if they violate policy, at what level they're going to hold them accountable in making recommendations to the superintendent and the board. And their answer when I asked them, why do you feel you need to manage defensively, was paradigm shifting for me as a researcher. The number one response was, I manage defensively because I fear legal challenge. And I asked them then as a follow-up, why do you fear legal challenge? And the overwhelming majority response said, I feel legal challenge because I'm not certain that my school board and my superintendent will back me up if I make a recommendation. I began to study that, colleagues, and analyzed why would they have that kind of fear, because I was able to relate to that. I served on the board of large urban districts just like you do, and I wanted to know more. Why do you feel insecure about us having your back? And what it led me to was where we're at today. It led me to identify that in my surveys with 100 randomly selected school districts throughout the nation, 33% or 34% were over 30,000 students and greater, 33% were under 30,000 but greater than 10,000 students in size, and 33% were less than 10,000 students. I asked them, do you put in place at the time of hire a clearly defined set of employee expected behaviors based on the school board's existing policies that are designed to create a safe and supportive environment conducive to learning? I asked that same question of all 500 Fortune 500 companies. It took me 6 months to get responses back from the Fortune 500 companies, but I got 100% response. 100% said, we hand our employees at the time of hire a clearly defined, authorized by the highest level of authority, an employee code of expected behaviors that are minimums. And they are backed up by our policies and regulation. And they are required to sign receipt for them. And we place that in their personnel file so that we can show that we gave them foreknowledge of our expectations. I asked that of those 100 randomly selected school districts, and only 2% indicated that they do that at the time of hire. They indicated that they had professional ethics codes They indicated that they had board policies of expected behaviors, but the overwhelming majority of them did not have in place an operationalized platform that ensured that the employee was being treated in a fair, reasonable, thoughtful, and consistently applied way based on board policies and state statute. I'd like to ask you, if you would, to turn to your agenda item and see that I'm on the second bullet from the opening remarks and introductions. Introduce the 4 pillars for creating a fair, reasonable, thoughtful, and consistently applied employee code of excellence. What we're doing now on behalf of the superintendent and you, the board, is we're taking your 10-year-old Trotwood-Madison Code of Conduct Guide that we helped you write when Superintendent Wagner, I believe that's correct, President Moore, was in charge almost a decade ago. And we are revising it, realigning it, rejuvenating it, and making sure that the board's policies are aligned and correlated to each of the requirements. And what we're going to do today is I'm going to present to you 2 activities that are based on Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 of the 4 pillars that we want you to see. So I'm going to click on Present Now.
I don't see it.
Are we supposed to have attachments?
You are.
No,
You don't have those?
no.
No. Can we get them really quick? We're supposed to have a
I don't
template,
see
right?
anything here.
I'm so mad at you, Ms. Baker.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Dr. Roswell, we're supposed to have templates, right?
You are. Everyone, those templates were sent to Dr. Cosby and to you, President Moore. I can,
Yeah, I'm searching. I was searching. I didn't get it. I didn't see anything, and my computer's not working here. So,
okay. Why don't I just send it through again to Dr. Cosby, and she can run and get you the attachments real quick, and then we can go on. Let me just, let me stop the presentation just a moment. This is not a problem for me. I've been doing this for 26 years, so I'm quite comfortable with hiccups that may occur. Bear with me just a moment. So while I'm doing this, I'm going to go ahead and
You said it, is that what that was?
I'm going to resend and I'll just use something that an email that I'll forward, and I'll put the attachment on. Dr. Cosby, are you able to get your email real quick?
I should be, I'm here waiting on it.
Okay.
If you send it, it should come right here.
And I apologize. I should have confirmed that you guys received those.
Did you need something? Sorry.
I think once he sends it, he's just asking me to forward it to everybody, is that correct?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes, and I do apologize. So bear with me just a second. I'm almost done. We are getting her done. All right. Almost there. Got to go through a little bit of protocol here.
Take a look at yours.
Oh, no, I'm just gonna get it from my phone.
Yes.
Thank you, though.
Okay. Almost done. 1 minute.
We're good.
We are associated either through training as I'm doing this or code development in over 2,200 school districts. So I am going through a maze here. Because we're a software development firm, we have some pretty stringent protections in place for viruses and this and that. And I have to go through some protocol to get to where I've housed your attachments. Here they are.
You know where you sent them, Dr. Braswell? You sent them to Luke, and if it's okay, Luke said he can go on and send them out.
Okay. I'm almost there.
He said, okay.
Got it. Okay. Here it comes. Luke, what is your email address?
Mine's Luke Foltz. That's it.
Open the meeting.
I got it. Got it. Here it comes. It is on its way, my friend. Okay, so Luke, just interrupt me when you get it, and we will take it from there.
Got it. I'm forwarding it.
Okay, thanks.
Do you have it, Luke?
Yes, sir, I do. I'm forwarding it now.
Great.
I got it.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for your patience there. We had just a little glitch. I thought those were already
Yeah.
done.
Thank you, though.
Okay, so I'm going to come back down here, and what I'd like for you to do is just watch for a minute what I'm doing, and I'm going to go to the Upslope portal, and once this process is customized and everybody is has put all the pieces of those 4 pillars in place, your principals and cabinet members and others will go online and be able to access all of these pieces of the puzzle. I'm going to just use this as an example to get to a video clip that I'm going to show you, which is the end of the process, so you can see what the end looks like when we roll this out after it goes through all of the levels of input by you and the directions that you and the superintendent will have for us. I'm going to log in. I'm going to click here and go to your state of Ohio. I'm going to share first, I think. Luke, am I doing entire screen?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I think you can see the map of the United States, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm going to click on Ohio. employee conduct, and then I'm going to go to the Trotwood-Madison draft that we have. And by the way, in your negotiated agreements, there's several references to this code from 10 years ago that we've already aligned for you. I'd like for you to watch this 9.5-minute video clip. This is a rollout video that Dr. Cosby and you all will decide if you would like for each of the principals to use this video to present what we did, why we did it, how we did it. And when I say we, I mean us collectively, and what the benefits are of doing it. Take a watch. In our community, we believe that we have one of the finest school districts in the state. Everyone comes to work each day with the best intentions to do what is right by our students. As is the case in all workplaces, there is a need for clearly defined and consistently regulated expectations so that all employees know the rules. In order for our district to define these expected behaviors for employees, we began a research-based process to identify more clearly those expectations and effectively communicate them throughout the district, because we believe you have a right to know what is expected of you as an employee. Without a clearly defined district-wide set of employee expectations, there was the possibility that we might be implementing employee expectations independently in each of our buildings. Therefore, we wanted to establish consistency in our approach to communicating our employee expectations. It is our goal to ensure that our district is being fair, reasonable, thoughtful, and consistent when holding ourselves accountable to federal law, state statute, board policy, and the master agreement, if applicable, in all matters involving the ethics and conduct of employees. Today, we are sharing with you how we propose to improve the way we operate in this regard, because we all have personal goals, professional goals, and building or site level goals. And as representatives of the district, we desire to reflect on past practices and improve. To start, let's address 3 common questions you may have about our expected behaviors for employees. Question number 1, why are we doing this? There are 5 major reasons. First, to ensure that all employees understand that they are being held to high standards for ethics and conduct at all times. We acknowledge that school personnel are held to high standards by the communities in which they serve. Our community expects us to be strong role models for their children on a daily basis. And as such, it is important for us to affirm to our community that we acknowledge and embrace these standards as an educational institution. Second, to ensure that all employees are aware of what those standards for ethics and conduct actually are. The board believes that it is equally important for the administration to be fully transparent with employees about what is expected of them. As a result, the administration will make the standards available to each employee within its expected behaviors for employees or code. Third, to encourage and facilitate compliance with the code. We believe that all employees want to follow the rules necessary to maintain effective, safe, and supportive learning and working environments. Further, we believe that all employees will accomplish what is expected of them if they are asked to do so in a fair, reasonable, thoughtful, and consistent manner by the administration. According to the research, however, employees are more inclined to meet behavioral expectations when they see the administration following its own rules. Consequently, administrators and supervisors will be held accountable for closely adhering to the rules that all employees are being held accountable to, including themselves. Fourth, to detail the regulatory framework that will be kept in mind by administrators and supervisors when addressing code violations. Our school district is committed to protecting the due process rights of all employees facing disciplinary actions. As such, the administrative guidelines associated with our code detail the steps that will be taken by administrators and supervisors before, during, and after each type of disciplinary action to ensure adherence to federal law, state statute, board policy, and the master agreement if applicable. Fifth, to minimize the need for formal disciplinary actions. The research is clear. Effective districts that actively promote a strong ethical philosophy and clearly articulated expected behaviors for employees have less of a need to take formal action in cases of employee misconduct. To put this research into practice, the framework used by administrators and supervisors to manage code violations includes informal opportunities for self-remediation. There may be times, however, when consequential disciplinary action is required. Question number 2. How was the code developed? Both the code and its companion administrative guidelines were developed and agreed to by a team of representative stakeholders from across departments throughout the school district. Both are based on current federal law, state statute, board policy, and master agreement if applicable. Neither contains any new rules for employees. The research indicates that districts with well-defined codes are far less likely to manage cases of employee misconduct inconsistently. However, they are far more likely to provide employees with informal opportunities for self-remediation instead of resorting to formal disciplinary action. The code developed by the stakeholder groups takes both of these concerns into account. It is important to note, however, that not all code violations will be handled informally. Some code violations are serious enough to warrant formal disciplinary action upon first offense, and even repetitive misconduct of a lesser nature may eventually require formal sanctions if and when self-remediation has failed in the past. Question number 3. What are your major responsibilities for implementing the code? There are 3. First, be aware of your responsibility for supporting our mission, vision, educational philosophy, objectives, and goals of the school district. As an employee, your actions and behaviors on a daily basis can either support or undermine these core tenets of our district. Responsibility applies to all employees, regardless of the job classification or specific roles in the district. Second, read, understand, ask questions about, and abide by the code. Standards for ethics and conduct contained in the code summarize the district's expectations for your actions and behaviors in the workplace. When in doubt about any specific action or behavior, you are encouraged to consult with your immediate supervisor or with human resources. Third, discharge your assigned duties ethically, conscientiously, competently, and professionally. Putting the code into practice across every aspect of your job description not only promotes a sense of professional accomplishment, but also contributes to effective, safe, and supportive learning and working environments. If implemented properly, our code and companion administrative guidelines will support our combined efforts, which are to realize a culture where higher levels of student achievement is paramount to who we are and what we do as a school district. Thank you for your dedication and commitment to our students and the community. So what I'd like to do now is open it up and ask you if you have any comments or thoughts about what you've heard thus far, based on the fact that we're going to follow a 4-pillar approach to interacting and laying the foundation for the operationalizing of your expected behavior policies throughout the district. This system is based on further research that I did during my dissertation that put heavy emphasis on a belief that 98% of employees will simply do what you ask them to do if you ask them to do it in a fair, a reasonable, a thoughtful, and most importantly, consistent manner. When we're inconsistent, when we manage defensively, we're sending the wrong signals to employees. At times, it's okay to violate board expected behaviors that are designed to maintain a safe and supportive environment conducive to learning. And when we as administration are not consistent in holding ourselves and employees closely accountable to those, we often find ourselves increasing legal risk to the district due to the fact that we're not in a fair, reasonable, thoughtful, and consistent manner making employees aware that certain behaviors cannot be allowed because it puts students and staff at risk. It creates an environment that is in some respects hostile. It is not approved by board policy, state statute, and federal guidelines that put heavy emphasis on civil rights. Finally, when I was a young man, and I'm 64, I was trained as an administrator. I got my master's degree in educational administration, Dr. Cosby, in 1986. I was trained that when an employee in a school that I'm a principal at or a superintendent in a district violates board policy, that they are punished consequentially. When I began to do the research 4 years later after getting my master's degree and starting this research, I found out that that's not effective leadership skills. Leaders, in my opinion, are not effective unless they understand what leadership skills they should utilize as leaders. And one of those skills is to understand when you can give an employee a self-remediable growth opportunity and talk with them, because the research indicates that the majority of employees will simply do what you ask them to do if you ask them to do it in a fair, reasonable, thoughtful, and consistent way. And because most issues that come up are minor in nature, there has been no injury. And because all employees, including the administration, have a right at the federal level to be given foreknowledge of the organization's expected behavior policies, and if a violation occurs, to be given forewarning and or a self-remediable growth opportunity to correct the concern. So this is a different approach in a 21st century school, in a 21st century school district. As I close this section, it's a different approach because our children today are being raised differently than my generation. I was raised by my parents in a far different way than Rhonda and I raised our three daughters. And we are much more apt as supervisors to explain our actions up front to the employees, the millennial teachers that are now in the classrooms. And they are mature enough intellectually to understand if we do it if we say this in a fair, reasonable, thoughtful, and consistent manner, that this has to be done for the benefit and safety of all students and fellow employees, so that we're creating an environment conducive to learning. Pillar 1 in your guideline is an ethical philosophy statement. It is where I'd like to start right now and present to you a format that you have sent to you by our fine IT gentleman, Mr. Luke. And I'd like you to go to page 4 in your packet, or page 3 is the first example. And I want to say for the record, these are examples of ethical philosophy statement press releases that come from the school board and are presented as part of the hiring practice package, to all employees at the time of hire. It states what your collective ethical beliefs and philosophies are, and puts heavy emphasis on sending a signal from you to the staff and the community and the parents that you get it, that you understand what importance has been placed on you as the elected representatives of the community's collective ethical beliefs and philosophies as they send their children to Trotwood-Madison schools. I'd like to ask you, if you would, to just start scanning through those. I'm going to open this up for questions in just a second. And there are 3 examples. And then what I'm going to ask you to do, I'm going to break you up in just a moment into 3 groups of 2. And you could do that how you're sitting, or you could move around. We could count off and have you move around. And then we're going to write an ethical philosophy press release. And we've got about 50 minutes to be able to do that according to our allotted time. And I am the type of person that is very, very cognizant of your valuable time. So if we said that we're going to be done by a certain time, I want to be done by that time. And then you tell me if you want to extend it. So if you would allow me to really keep us on track, and you go ahead and ask the questions, but I'm going to be cognizant of our time commitment and allotment here today. So with the activity that I just explained to you, I'm going to pull up a template of a press release. I've given you 3 examples there. This first paragraph states simply what you are doing, what you are introducing, what you've revised. The second paragraph goes in a little more detail in the form of a press release to the community that says how we did it, what we did, how we did it. And then there are some comments that are examples. These are all examples. These are templates that we're not writing this for you. You have to come up with yours, and we will work through that after you read through some of these in your groups for your paragraph. And then I want you to just simply, you can borrow pieces of this or an entire paragraph if you want. These are generic statements that we have from our research throughout the nation, and you can borrow them. We would hope that you would add to it. You might want to cut some things out for your paragraph. And then as we finish each of the groups, I'd like for you to take your written document over to Luke or to Reva and let her type it out that as you finish it for your group, your paragraph, and then she can send that directly to me and I'll drop it into this template here and I'll shoot it up on the screen what each of your final suggestions were. To be fully transparent, folks, what we want you to do is own your ethical philosophy as a team, an elected governing board, that's a Western term, school board team, so that you are saying to the community, we understand the importance you've placed on us, and we're committed to upholding and ensuring that we're upholding the highest ethical standards throughout our Trotwood-Madison School District. Now, why would Dr. Braswell say that this is a good activity? Well, the research says this: if an organization's ultimate authority will send a document like this out at the beginning of every year, and I say send it home with the kids, I say put it in the newspaper if it's affordable in your city newspaper. I say require the principals to read it during orientation every year. I say make it a part of the hiring practice presentation. If we will do that, just the release of this, the research indicates, will reduce the claims of off-duty employee misconduct that would come back to the district to have to deal with by 50% for the next year overnight. That's validated through research studies. You send this out, it reduces off-duty claims of employee misconduct, or alleged, I should say, employee misconduct on average by 50% overnight.
You made that call.
So I want to open that up, President Moore, and allow you to have your members ask any questions or present any of their thoughts very quickly before we take a quick 5-minute break.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. And can you see me?
I got you.
Okay, wonderful. I'm looking at the information and I see the pillar 1 and the 3 examples. Was everybody able to access that information?
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody's got it, so that's important. I think what we will do is along the lines of just breaking down into the groups, I want to open it up for question also and discussion on what Dr. Braswell has shared with us and what our assignment is. Is everybody clear on what he's asking us to do?
The only thing about the groups, that's going to be a problem. It probably would have been better to do it virtually if we're going to do groups, small groups, because we're going to be screaming across at each other to do this. And I don't know. So that's what comes to mind. Now that we're here, is we're going to break out in small groups, but we have a mask, and that's my thought.
Yeah, yeah. Ms. Jeter Freeman, interesting you should say that, because we grappled with how to do this effectively. And even on the virtual platform, we couldn't be in separate rooms on this Google platform and still have a public meeting. So is that correct, Luke? I just want to make sure I'm correct. So I'm wondering, when we break into groups, we've got these tables that are set out. And Luke, can we capture the board working with these tables the way that they are? Okay.
We have one pad caster. Yes, we can get a phone or something to make sure that each one's.
Okay, perfect.
Quick question.
Yes,
I didn't mean to-
go right ahead.
Why do we need to do that? What's wrong with the setup now?
Ms. Jeter Freeman was just saying that, she's concerned about going back and forth with the person in her group.
Right, I'm saying not break into small groups, not,
Just continue.
Oh, just continue the dialogue
Yeah.
as a one
I
big
agree.
group.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
agree. I
okay.
like that.
Yeah, if
Madam,
we, yes.
Madam President, if I may interrupt, I have to remember my protocol here as a former board member, so I'm going to try to be a good colleague of y'all's and get back in the groove of that. I think that's an excellent idea.
Okay.
And I'm sorry I missed the name of the member that made that suggestion.
That was Mr. Scares and Ms. Jeter Freeman.
Yes, and to both of you, I really didn't think about that, given the pandemic, and so I think that's a great idea, and we can do it. If you will just allow me to kind of keep us moving, so that we can get through it, and then we can wordsmith things and break them down even more after today's meeting. Okay, I'll yield back, Madam President.
Okay. Thank you. So what we'll do is collectively as a group, we'll just go through these from where we sit.
I'm going to, Madam President, if I may, I'm going to pull up a template and share it. And I'm going to type, if you all agree with that, since we're going to do this as a group, I'm going to type your suggestions. And
You can take it.
before we get going, does everyone understand the task? And does anyone have any other? I yield back to you, Madam President. I'm sorry. Do you want to ask if anyone has any other questions before we start?
No, as a matter of fact, I'm just going to take a motion right now for a loose meeting, okay? And that way, if there's open dialogue, everybody can just speak as they need to speak. And so we're going to let the parliamentary stiffness out of this particular retreat. Can I get a motion?
So move.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions? Being none, Ms. Allen, will you call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Scares?
Yes.
Mrs. Bozeman?
Yes.
Mr. Andrews?
Yes.
Mrs. Judah Freeman?
Yes.
And Ms. Moore?
Yes, motion passes. We are now a loose meeting, which means we're gonna get to work, okay? And everybody can speak that needs to speak. That's a part of this retreat. Thank you.
And thank you to the board for extending that to me. That'll help me as well. Okay, so in the first paragraph, can you see this example up on the screen? It looks like it's flittering from my vantage point.
It is from ours too. I don't know why.
We don't have that here, do we?
Oh,
That part.
I don't think that's in this.
I
Yeah,
think
that's the example.
template.
Mm-hmm.
We
That's
can
your
probably still,
template
we
you
can
were
probably still
sharing?
just look at it.
It was.
It's not in
it
the
was,
board docs.
Liberated.
They sent it to your email.
Would you try it again?
Yeah, I'm gonna try it right now.
Okay. So far, so good.
Right. Well, we don't know why it fixed itself, but it did. So let's go with it. So board members, this is a press release. This example that I have up here is very vanilla. Insert district name. So it would start out with the city where we're coming from as a press release, and then it would say Trotwood-Madison Schools School District Board of Education introduces Code of Excellence. Now, the majority of our school districts throughout the nation call this a Code of Excellence. They don't call it a Code of Conduct Guide. The majority of our staff that we work with, they say, hey, let's not go from a Code of Conduct Guide. Let's say these are behaviors that make us that are highlighted in a Code of Excellence. You can call this anything you want. You can call it a professional code. a code of conduct, a code of professional conduct, a code of excellence. You tell me, what do you think we should call this document, which is simply a single page document that is going to be distributed to all employees from starting with superintendent down, that highlights what your most important expected behaviors are as a board?
Before we do that, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
The code of conduct that was referenced, that you guys helped write when Dr. Wagner, is it Wagner?
Yes.
Was here. Is that different from the code of conduct policy that's in the policy book now?
I
those
don't,
two separate?
I don't think it is, no.
So we're updating it now. That's, I think, what we're trying to do.
Right, I get that, but those are not two separate documents, correct? The previous code of conduct
Right.
and the one that's currently in the policy book. Now, those are you're talking about the same, okay.
Yes.
Now, if I may, Madam President, let me just add something there. Boy, I wish I could see you guys better so I could learn your names. Was that Mr. Sears?
Scarce?
Okay. That original code was, we did it in a different way then because we started from scratch. And we're coming to you now in the revision side of things because the majority of you were not involved in that original piece several years ago. So the important thing I want you to know back then that's really important was that Dr. Wagner, is that correct?
Yes.
President
Yes.
Moore? She and I agreed that we wanted buy-in throughout the district from key representative stakeholders. So the union president was a member of that, what we called back then, the superleadership team in developing the code of expected behaviors. And I think that was a really good move because over the years, when we revised this document that we've already done the grunt work on it, board. We incorporated and saw in your most recent negotiated master agreement due process steps that the board had or the union had negotiated over the last decade that tie to the 10-year-old code of conduct guide.
So is the expectation today that we draft and adopt what we create here?
No.
Okay.
The expectation today is to draft it, but we want to make sure that you all are collectively not agreeing, but drafting what you believe needs to be said as we roll out this revised code. That's one of the most critical. That's the pillar one of the 4-pillar research. And I'll just tell you why. If we put these 4 pillars in place and they are adhered to consistently, resulting in a fair, reasonable, thoughtful approach to holding employees accountable to creating this safe and supportive environment conducive to learning, you will realize an average reduction of 70% in the need for any of your administrators to ever take or request formal disciplinary action. Employees will simply do what you ask them to do if it's clearly defined, it's fair, and all of the principals and the directors throughout the district are trained fully in proper leadership skills that ensure they're being fair, reasonable, thoughtful, and consistent.
So again, forgive what may seem like my ignorance.
I feel like it's.
So does that not, the current policy that exists doesn't lend itself to that?
If you all want to keep the current expected behaviors, that's fine with me.
I'm not saying that we need to keep the current expected behaviors. I'm just saying, what is the advantage of this particular update?
Well, one is we realigned all of the negotiated agreement due process steps in the administrative guidelines that are used by Dr. Cosby to operationalize your existing board expected behaviors in your original code.
So if we align that to the negotiated agreement, isn't it just going to change every time we renegotiate?
That's part of our ongoing support of you. If you agree to change due process steps, we will realign only in the administrative guidelines that Dr. Cosby sends to the principals and tells them that they have to uphold this guideline. So
Right.
If I may, if you don't mind, Mrs. Scarce, if I may, I think what we would first have to do before we go to adopting and creating a new one is to first look at what we currently have. What currently exists, what's void in that one that we need to replace or add to. Because we have to first know what we have. And like you say, maybe there are no changes needed, or Dr. Cosby, maybe there are some you would like for us to include that are not there. But I think it's important before we jump into anything new, we have to first look at what we currently have.
And let me say this if I can. As far as an administrative guideline, the superintendent wouldn't need a board policy to execute administrative guidelines. She could create that based off the support of the policy that currently exists and draft it however she seems necessary for her staff.
Yeah.
And may I add to that statement that administrative guideline has been revised at her direction with your original code and updating it with additional board policies that may have been introduced in the last decade, and it is prepared and done. So,
well, excuse my forwardness, then why are we here?
Because pillar 1 and 2 needs to be updated, and it needs to be introduced to you as a new board that did not introduce to the community 10 years ago the original ethical philosophy of the code and the expected behaviors of the code. I can show you the expected behaviors, which is activity 2. I'm very flexible though, board. If you want to have a look at the original code, it's only 2 pages. It is it's a press release, and it is a set of expected behaviors that list for the employees what the board approved 10 years ago as part of the pillar 1 and 2 rollout. And then the pillar 3 is the administrative guidelines doing exactly, sir, what you just said, and that's the regulation. And she doesn't need your approval to do that, but she can't write the administrative guidelines until you all have identified what the expected behaviors are within the Code of Conduct Guide. And here is a draft of the new code itself. Can you see this on the board?
Yeah, what, is that part of the document that we have, Dr.
Yes.
Braza?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what page is that?
It is page 6. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, from the standpoint when he talked initially about principals feeling like they work from a defensive, model when they were, what should I do to this person or what should I do with that person? There wasn't the fairness necessarily because it's like, well, I can't say that to this person because, somebody might like them or somebody might not. This is me getting that acknowledgement from you guys that if I do these things, that you won't say to me, well, why are you doing that? I don't want to have to work from a defensive, standpoint. This is saying we're all in agreement. We all are saying, again, because that was 10 years ago, I wasn't even here when Dr. Wagner and I think Mr. Cox were here and they did it. I might have been here, but I was here in a different position. And so now I think just us developing, you guys developing what we want to put out and say, oh, we're bringing this back. We're doing it because if you think about it, the teachers, a lot of them have been here longer than 10 years. And if we haven't been using it, it may be harder for them to buy into it versus if we, start it now, new teachers will know it. And those teachers that have been here a long time will say, oh, this board is on board with it. I think that's the advantage of us sort of doing it again. And because you're right, it is doing it again, but it's been a full 10 years and it's been transition in principals, transition in superintendent, transition in board. It doesn't have to be long and convoluted. I mean, we can do it as simply as you would like, but it's just saying it again, that we are all on one page and getting this done.
One thing that might be helpful for the board, and this is what I'm hearing, is I'm looking on page 6 of the acknowledgement of receipt of the Code of Excellence. We already had this done. What are the changes? Like what did we change to meet the negotiated agreement or to meet the differences in how we're operating now versus how we operated then? Because even though, and I hear what Mr. Scarce is saying along the lines of, Mr. Scarce, by the way, Dr. Braswell, is part of the policy committee, along with Ms. Bozeman. And again, they go over the policies pretty thoroughly, and they work with Neola, and also they work with superintendent. So I guess, what it sounds like I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Scarce, is that we have this already in place, correct? And what are the changes? What is it that we're doing differently along the lines of making adjustments in this code of conduct so that it can be implemented within the district at the pleasure of the superintendent? Yeah, because again, I hear what you're saying. Also, I don't know if, Dr. Cosby, you were aware that we spent 2 days in a retreat last year. Okay, yeah. And a lot of the strategic goals and the strategic plans, the North Star for this district were created in 2 days. It was complete 2 days seminar. And it wasn't just the board, but it was the staff, it was community stakeholders, it was students, it was parents. And there was a part in there, these were just 6 aligning goals in different areas of what we do in the district. But it kind of created the overarching holy grail of how we operate, period. So I don't know if some of that is already done, okay? And then with these 12 items, if you wanted to tell us 15 items, what changed, what we need to do differently, I think the board can just read these and go through them. These are things that were already created. Even the new folks, if you guys can read through them and just get a refresher, but what changed in these?
The way Upslope does this is we send them our negotiated agreement, and of course they have the Ohio Revised Code, and so then they go through and make sure everything is aligned. So I can't tell you specifically, what was changed, and maybe nothing was changed, I'm not sure. I just think that I would think it would be helpful, even if it is just us reading through them right now and saying, can we look at number 1 or number 5 or whatever, and just at the end of it, all agree that we will adhere to them. We do know that they connect to the negotiated agreement. We do know that they are in line with Ohio Revised Code as of today, not, how it was 10 years ago. So I'm okay with doing it that way.
See, like those are crucial. Like if the code of conduct is associated with Ohio Revised Code as it is today,
Right.
Those are major changes, and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, we do need to talk about this.
Right.
And so I agree with what Ms. Moore was saying. If we can identify the changes, whether we're updating this because the law has changed, or we're updating this because, if you need, from me, I don't speak for the board, but for me to support, an administrative guideline or code of conduct that you've created for your staff, great. I support that.
It kind of feels out of line or something. It feels like we shouldn't be doing, it feels like someone else should be giving information, not the board. It doesn't feel like the board
Well, we
would
have
be able to inform you on.
No, this is just you agreeing to it. This is you agreeing to it. We already, are going to work with principals and everybody else to inform them that this has been updated and my board has approved it. And you're saying it's okay, so then I work with them and we move forward that way.
I don't want to be, I'm really not trying to be,
No.
difficult, but I think as the superintendent, whatever you put out, I would assume people would understand we already support, because we've delegated that authority to you as the superintendent.
I appreciate that, Mr. Scarry. I understand that, but what I'm saying is sometimes, to be honest, in reality, it doesn't, unless they hear this new board say it, I believe sometimes you end up getting pushed by, well, that's what we've always done. I get here and it's, that's what we've always done. Well, you all haven't always done it because you haven't always been on the board. And that doesn't mean that it aligns with this. Dr. Braswell, you're hearing the same thing I'm hearing. I'm okay if they are okay with saying, we can develop this, release and we can move forward and they will trust that we, are doing the right thing. And I say we because, of course, he's helped, with this process. Yeah, I just want you to say, yes, whatever you guys come up with.
I support your direction for your staff.
As long as it's in line with the strategic.
Yeah, and you know what? I want to be. I want us to be really transparent too of why we're here, and I think that would be helpful. You're brand new superintendent in this district, all right? You have uncovered some broken systems and protocols that are taking place in this district that need to be revived, okay? Along the lines of the code of conduct, how we equitably and fairly discipline, or not, I shouldn't use the word discipline, but respond to situations that happen in this district. And again, you want to be real clear on how we do that with some sort of measurement to say, if this happens, this happens, this happens. I don't care if it's your uncle, your brother, your cousin. I don't care if they're your best friend. They've been here forever. There's only one size this is the one size that fits all. We're going to put the information in and this is how we're going to handle it. Is that what we're trying to do with Dr. Braswell? Because he has a proven system that works.
Right.
This is research-based. Right. This is not theory. This is hands-on. Our level of participation in this is to champion what we're going to do in this district based on the code of conduct that you, your director, your cabinets, your staff have come up with.
Right. And I will say, just for clarity's sake, because I know oftentimes, the staff understands that there are mitigating and aggravating circumstances that might have caused someone to do something that violates the code. The way we're even talking about it even deals with that. So I mean, for example, because I don't want it to seem like it's so simplistic that
Yeah.
you do
Right.
this, then
Yeah.
this
Oh,
is
yeah, for
absolutely
sure.
what's
For sure,
happening.
for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
But let's say a staff member is tardy for 3 times, the 4th time is supposed to be a letter. Turns out the 4th time they're tardy is because they were rushing their wife to the hospital to have a baby.
Yeah.
Then that is a mitigating circumstance and they would not get a letter for it.
Right.
So all of that has been taken into account. I mean, I do not believe that you would be disappointed about how this will play out. I think that everyone, I think our union, our teachers, our staff members on all levels, including administrators, because we're also held accountable to all of these same things, would be, okay, this was just an opportunity for you. If you felt you wanted to say, wait a minute, let me make sure I know, what those things are. But it has been aligned. It's all been aligned. So anything that we're doing through our district, through our negotiated agreement and through ORC has been aligned. And this was really just a nod to say, okay, we've seen it, we've read through it. And yes, Dr. Breswell's good at it, and I appreciate him wanting to walk us through it step by step. But it's not, if this board is saying, you know what, I can read that on my own and I'm good, then I'm good as well.
So is this what you've already developed
With him?
for the staff?
This is what we are hoping to get approved by you for the staff as the things that you would like. Now, you may want to tweak wording, and things like that. That was one of the reasons for sort of going through it. You may want to change one, kick it out, but yes.
May I follow up with that, Madam Chair, and say, how about y'all turn to page 6 in your packet, look at those 15 recommended drafts, and by the way, those 15, this is the code. This is a code. These are the most common types of issues that are dealt with on a regular basis throughout the nation. And you watch those as I show you her aligned administrative guidelines. And Mr. Scarce, I want to thank you because you've teed this up. I'm using a term there that I'm quite familiar with from golf. But let me just show you her administrative guidelines, if that's okay, Madam Chair.
Yes. Go right ahead.
Is that okay?
That's 6?
Yeah, we're on page 6 now, and that is the code of conduct 15. I guess those are the focus district code of conduct. You and the superintendent and her cabinet have developed that, right? This what we're looking at on page 6.
Yes, but I want to stress as the researcher that y'all have to own page 6. So if you want to tweak that or take one out or add one. Now, what we don't want here is 8,000 statements of do not do this. What we want are 12, no more than 15 statements of expected behaviors worded in a positive manner that have breadth and depth. And then you just simply, my recommendation to you is that you, when it's done and you're pleased with it, you're exactly right, Mr. Scarce, and the comments that all of you have made, Ms. Jeter Freeman, the comments that you had made, you don't have to approve it. It's already in your board policies. We would not have recommended this to you had we not already correlated with your board policies that these are your existing expected behaviors. So that's why I said in the video clip, there are no new rules here. If you want a new rule, you have to write a policy giving Dr. Cosby and her team the authority to hold an adult accountable to it.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Go right ahead.
That was ultimately my question. We're not creating new policy.
No, sir.
Okay.
So given that,
Okay.
I'm sorry. Go right ahead. I'm sorry, Dr. Bronzo.
I just wanted to say to Mr. Scarce, you're exactly right in that statement there. But there's nothing, see, what we're creating on your behalf is we're operationalizing your ethical beliefs, and you're really the only ones that have the authority from the community to collectively say, this is what our ethical beliefs are, staff. And as a result of that, these are our policies that you are expected to follow. And then what Dr. Cosby is saying is, I'm taking your policies and I'm operationalizing them, which I'm going to use to run the day-to-day of the school. And that's her primary role from us as board members, you as board members. I went back 20 years to her. You're delegating that authority to her, Mr. Scarce. And I know you know exactly what I'm saying there, because I see where you're going with this line of questioning, and I fully support it. I yield.
I just don't know if it's our responsibility as board members to make sure the superintendent makes our board policy operational. She can make it operational. I mean, that's
That's her job.
her job.
That's her job.
You know?
That's her job.
And again, I don't want to be, I'm not really trying to be difficult, but did we need a special retreat to draft a press conference or press release?
All right, let me respond. And I agree with you fully. You don't have to, that's her role.
Mm-hmm.
You know that, and I know that as board members. It's her role. The problem, though, is we don't have full transparency most of the time in school districts, because they're not handing the employees anything that is easy to digest. They're saying, you have our policies, hold them accountable to it. But then when something occurs and it touches us politically, I'm being fully transparent, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes.
If it touches us politically, sometimes there are those of us on the board, and this is part of my research, that will violate the board's collective policy. They might walk into a school and direct the principal to do something unilaterally when that's not their role, and it results in a miscommunication. Or they might say, no, I don't want to accept your recommendation, Madam Superintendent, because I'll never be invited to the family summer cookout again, because this is, related to, this action is related to, these things happen regularly throughout this nation.
But you make it sound like this is a code of conduct for the board and not the staff.
No, not at all. What I am saying, though, I'm saying to you, intellectual to intellectual and colleague to colleague, the board needs to have some ownership of the implementation of their policies and then hand it over to her. And the research said this: if you simply hand out a code, if she does that, Dr. Cosby, and it's never mentioned again, you will be in the same place that you are in right now from 10 years ago. See, when Dr. Wagner left, her successor came in, and they did not keep the code moving forward. They did not have, most principals have no real a training in how to effectively modify an employee behavior. A lot of principals are trained the way I was trained. If they violate board policy, you slap them on the wrist and you stick something in their official personnel file. It doesn't have to be that way. These employees will do what you ask them to do. And when you see a lot of problems coming forward, and I don't know whether you've seen any problems, but I'm a betting man. If I was a betting man, I bet that if this code is not being reminded every year just by you in an open meeting saying, by the way, we're authorizing you to distribute and have read the expected behaviors of the code, And then we'll update it every year as part of our support of you. But let me, if I may, if you give me permission, Madam Chair, how about I show them the first final revised draft, and I think it'll address exactly what each of you are asking and comments that you're making, that you'll see that we agree with your position.
Go right ahead.
All right, I'm going to take you online. 10 years ago, this wasn't it. It was printed. It wasn't this detailed. This is a document that the principals and the cabinet are going to have an ID and a password to access when a concern comes up. These are the most common types of issues dealt with on a regular basis. Can everyone see that?
Is this in the attachment?
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Can you see it on the screen?
Barely.
Barely?
Yeah, let me move. Maybe if I move, I can see it better.
Yeah, I just had to find it.
Is it
Okay.
really small?
She's just in the spot where she can't see it,
Oh, okay.
but it's like 4 screens, so she's headed to one.
Yeah.
So, so Miss Jeter Freeman, if you were a principal and you had one of these issues alleged to have occurred, just tell me where to click here, an issue that you'd like to take a look at and how it's formatted. And Mr. Scarce, we're talking about the operationalizing of your board policies right here. So just give me any one of these that you want us to go to.
Insubordination.
Very good. So if I was a principal, Ms. Jeter Freeman, and I had an employee that has been alleged to be insubordinate, I want to know what Dr. Cosby is directing that I do based on your policies. So I'd go online as the first step. I'd click on insubordination, and I would see a definition and examples of insubordination. Now, this is a customized document. It's a living document. So as new examples come up, they would notify Dr. Cosby, probably through your HR director's office, and she would approve to have that example added by us. So she would send us an email and says, this is an example that we want you to add to insubordination. And in the next time in 24 hours, when they log back in, that new example specific to Trotwood-Madison administration would be there. Here's where, Mr. Scarce, we have aligned it to Ohio Revised Code. And I hope you can see the labor intensiveness of this process, because this is the first time throughout the nation that this level of alignment to existing statute, federal code, and policy has ever been done, to where I don't have to search for this stuff. Then the licensure code, that's a reference for insubordination, Ms. Jeter Freeman, to the licensure code stating we discourage that in Ohio. And then we have the board level policies. Now, these are either directly or in some areas indirectly related to insubordination. And Dr. Cosby knows that this is really the most important area that her people should be aware of, because this is the policy. Without these policies, we have no authority to hold an adult accountable to anything unless we have it in state statute, licensure code approved by the legislature, of which I know a little bit about as a state senator, and then board level policies. So then we even take it down, and if it's direct or indirect to the agreement level, and these have all been updated, and the agreement levels change constantly. And we do from time to time make mistakes. Now, if I scroll down a little bit further, I see initially this Dr. Cosby is saying that the principal may handle an alleged insubordination charge if, and it's considered to be minor if it's the case facts are mostly mitigated. So now that's why Dr. Cosby said earlier, you could have someone that's tardy, but the reason they were tardy or the reason they were insubordinate was that it made sense. It was logical. A principal was charging Mr. Scarce, as an example, of being insubordinate because he refused to follow a directive that was unsafe or illegal. And employees have a right to do those things if they feel that it's unsafe and illegal. So she always has a 3-step range that she's going to require them to show through the case facts whether or not the alleged violation of your existing code actually occurred in supporting a violation of insubordination. Now, once these documents are in place, the acknowledged verbal warning and written warning in Dr. Cosby's operation would be maintained initially for a first occurrence. I'm not real sure what your negotiated agreement says because I don't do those alignments on my end, but we recommend, according to the research, don't put those in the official personnel file for a first occurrence if they are informal. And informal is an acknowledged verbal warning and a written warning saying to the employee, I'm giving you the ability to self-remediate this concern. But if it continues again as a second occurrence, these documents would be attached to a formal proposal to take formal disciplinary action. I yield back. You know, while we're waiting here, if I can, let me just go back to the table of contents and go to, let's say that I decided to issue a written warning. That, in my research, is an informal, self-remediable disciplinary action that should be able to be requested for withdrawal if the behavior changes 1 year from the time of issuance. Those can be set, and Dr. Cosby and I, with her leadership team, will go through those. But I click on written warning and I see what she is saying that I am to do for a professional staff member based on board policy and negotiated agreement. You see that TMEA? That says that the supervisor will complete an informal inquiry of the incident that, 1, both establishes and verifies grounds, and 2, includes employees' response to the allegation. Those are required as part of this negotiated agreement statute. During the action, we are to do this as principals, and here again is why we're to do it. And after the action, we are to follow these guidelines, and in the negotiated agreement, here's why we are to follow these guidelines. So I can see, Ms. Jeter Freeman, that you're there. I will address this to you. There's nothing left to chance here. I see Ms. Moore coming back.
Yeah, we're all here. We just had to move around the room.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, so we're all here. We heard everything.
So the
Right.
point I'm making here is for all of you, and I want to thank you all. I thank Mr. Scarce as well for being persistent here, President Moore, and all of you. Nothing you have said is contrary to where we're going. We just want you to send a signal out to the administration. There's no need to manage our employees defensively because we're presenting to you the authority to hold them accountable from our policies, and that's what Dr. Cosby has operationalized here online. And as long as this is you saying to the principals and the leadership in Trotwood-Madison schools, as long as you follow our policies, you are in line with our ethical beliefs and philosophy, and we've got your back. It's when they don't follow the policies that we end up treating employees unfairly. We're harder on one employee at one school and a higher level on a progressive discipline scale than we are with another employee at a different school because we're allowing the principal's own personal ethical philosophy override your collective ethical philosophy, which is the foundation for your existing board policies of expected behavior today. I yield back, Ms. Moore.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for that very clear explanation of where we are today opposed to where we were 10 years ago with this particular process in place. So given that, so that we can move along, if it's the pleasure of the board, I'd like to take a 5-minute break and then come back. And basically, you just want us to look over these 15 code of conduct, I guess, the page 6 that was presented to us, and just be aware of that. And if there's any word changes, make a suggestion, or if there's something that we feel that we may want to recommend to the superintendent, we can do that.
Well, if I can add, I wouldn't suggest that we make any word changes because
Okay.
this is exactly what the policy.
Oh, okay.
Then we would.
Yeah, okay.
Change.
I know early on, Dr. Braswell said tweak, and so did superintendent.
I
So,
think it was just like, I will model responsible actions by recording. Is that sufficient for you? Because that, I will model, that terminology isn't in there.
yeah,
But if you like that idea, and that was our way of saying that we're gonna say these things in a positive manner versus saying, in a negative way. You have to come to work every day on time, which people should know, that.
yeah,
But sometimes if you don't, say it someplace that you can say you're not doing number one, people tend to forget it. I mean, things happen. You guys know, because I have to inform you when they do, that we would say, well, of course, you can't do that because you're at work. So this way I can say, well, that's number 7 on you received this code and you know that you're not supposed to do it.
okay.
Makes it clearer.
Well, I mean, I get that, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I just want to make sure we're not changing.
No.
No, we wouldn't
No.
change
Okay.
anything
Just-
that
okay.
impacts
Yeah.
it's just the wording.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna take a 5-minute bio break, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
All right,
Great.
thank you.
All right.
Yes,
Now, if President Moore, if you would like, if you think I should, I can show them how the administration would narrow these 3 choices down. I'm going to share real quick. And I've shifted what I'm doing here based on your closing remarks there, President Moore. I'm gonna bring the code, the draft template up of the code, And then I'd like to just go through it. Are you guys, I can't see you that well. Are you guys enjoying your lunch right now?
I believe they are.
Okay.
And their mouths are full, so they're not
Okay,
talking.
then I'm going to do all the work. That's why I asked. I didn't ask because I was hungry, although I am. But it's only 8:14 here, so I'm ready for a donut. I'm going to start with number one here. I want to go through it while you guys enjoy your meal. I think it's important that we go through this, and I'll tell you why. The research said this. I started to say this earlier, and I got sidetracked there. The research says that if an organization hands out a code of expected behaviors and gives it to the employees at the time of hire and never brings it up again except when they violate some policy, that within 180 days, the employees will begin to marginalize it. And within 2 years after that, it's no longer effective because no one even addressed it. So the research also says that if an organization approves a code and hands it out, and it's handed out during an orientation session, and the principal is required and directed from an operational standpoint to read those to the employees in an open setting and ask them for questions and comments, and brings it up before violations occurs during staff meetings, that you will see a 70% drop in the need to take formal disciplinary action. Why? Because employees will simply do what you ask them to do if you ask them to do it in a fair, reasonable, and thoughtful manner. Now, I'm an administrator. I have been a principal. I've been a superintendent, and I know this. I know from my work as a researcher that most issues that result in an acknowledgement by the administration that a violation has occurred, the majority of them are minor and can be handled either through coaching and counseling and or providing the employee in writing an informal self-remediable growth opportunity that is documented. And if it occurs after that and puts kids at risk, that informal action becomes the document to prove just and proper cause by the district from a legal standpoint in taking formal action. We need to begin to follow these steps so that we'll see a reduction in violations of your policies. That's why we revised, Mr. Scarce, instead of started from scratch, what was done by your predecessors 10 years ago. Now, the first code requirement is I will model responsible actions by reporting to work on time, being prepared for and remaining ready for duty per the terms of my employment agreement until fulfillment. Now, what I'm going to recommend to Dr. Cosby after this morning's discussion, President Moore and board, is that she put together a team with her cabinet. I'm going to recommend we have a couple teachers on that team, 3 principals from each grade block, cabinet level people, about 10 to 15 people, and we'll go through this again and get their thoughts about each of these and the wording for this. So if you have a concern as I go through this, I'm going to do what the research says and cover it with you real quickly. Do you feel that we should require employees to model responsible actions by preparing for and performing all assigned duties required by the job description. Now, I want to caution you as a former board member, I don't want you to vote on these. You know that. I'm just throwing that out there right now. Number 3, I'll model respect and responsibility by complying with justifiable directives by established lines of authority. That keyword, those keywords of by established lines of authority would indicate that an individual board member is not giving a directive to an employee is not an established line of authority. Individual board members have no authority unless you are in an open meeting with a agenda posted, and those kinds of actions are channeled through your board president, who is responsible for being your representative when issues of concern come up. And then they determine whether or not you need to get involved as a team. I will help ensure a clean, safe, and secure environment by identifying, reporting, and controlling, if possible, unsafe conditions and or safety hazards to maintain safe and secure working and learning environments. I will demonstrate a high level of professionalism and integrity when interacting with students, families, staff, community members, and other stakeholders. I will treat all stakeholders with dignity, compassion, and care by establishing and maintaining appropriate verbal, physical, emotional, and social boundaries. I will engage in physical contact with students only when there is clearly defined purpose that benefits the student and continually keeps the safety and well-being of the student in mind. I will ensure a safe working environment by complying with federal laws, state laws, board policies. And you can see where this is going. Now, I want to highlight one more, and you can read the rest of them on your own. Number 10, well, there's a couple more. I will encourage continuous improvement by directing any criticism of other staff members or of any department of the school system toward improving the district. Such constructive criticism is to be made directly to the administrator who has the responsibility for the situation. I lost you for a minute. Do you still have me?
Yes.
Okay. I will model safe, respectful, responsible behavior. Number 12, I'm skipping to the more important ones, by maintaining confidentiality of information as required. I will report actions that may represent violations of federal law and operating procedures. I will adhere to staff ethics, employee code of excellence, Ohio Professional Licensure Code of Ethics, and refrain from any activity that could interfere with either one's ability to effectively perform one's duties as assigned or the legitimate operational interest of the district. And I will comply with all other federal laws. Folks, I will say this as a researcher and a colleague, an educational colleague. This is the operational piece of your policies. This is not done in the majority of school districts throughout this nation, and our research has shown this. When this is operationalized, you have very few problems. And that's my goal as a researcher. I don't want to design anything that drops a hammer on an adult. As a principal, if I went back into the class, the district as a principal today, and I'm 64, knowing what I know now, I don't really care why an individual employee is targeted. What I care about is that I have the authority through the board to hold any individual employee that chooses to be tardy and doesn't report that in time for me to get coverage so that we're not putting kids at risk. That's what I care about. That is leadership. That's the operationalizing of your existing board policies. And that's where we're going with this. I know it will make a change. And then I would ask you all to step up to the plate and sign off on. If you all agree to these, sign at the bottom of these and let your principals and your cabinet see, and your employees, but your principals and cabinet see, if you hold everyone in your evaluation sphere fairly, reasonably, thoughtfully, and consistently accountable to adhering to these 12 or 15, whatever they end up being, requirements, we've got your back and here's our signatures to prove it. That's what they need to see. Because the real challenge is not an individual employee violating your policy. The real challenge is that our administration is treating the employees in a fair, reasonable, thoughtful, and consistent manner, following the due process steps of whatever negotiated agreement, whether we agree with it or not. If it's approved, we have to follow it, and understand and telling the employees, when possible, I'm going to give you a self-remediable growth opportunity in order to document that you have been made aware of the board's expected behavior policies. Now, that's not to imply that if someone were to do something egregious in like a sexual misconduct issue, that's not to imply that we're going to sit them down and have a coaching session with them or issue an oral or written warning as a self-remediable growth opportunity. There are times when someone does things that we cannot provide a self-remediable growth. For example, a bus driver receiving a DUI and they lose their CDL certificate. I can't do anything about keeping that bus driver's job because they're no longer authorized to drive that bus by state legislature on behalf of the citizens of the great state of Ohio. And there are violations that are going to be contract altering in nature on the first offense. And her guidelines here address that online. Are there any questions with what I just covered with you?
On number 13, on some of the others, we tell them who to report whatever they find to. And 13 is, I will report actions that may represent violations of federal laws, state laws, board policies, and operating procedures, but we don't say who they should report them to. In number 10, I think we say who they, if they have a, in number 10, they talk about if you have a criticism of an employee or a district to report it through your channels. And my only thought on number 10 is that, will they fear, or do we need to make a statement that there is no,
Retaliation?
So number 10 and 13 were the only two that stuck out for me.
Okay, let me address them real quick, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Okay, Miss Jeter Freeman, let me go directly back to Dr. Cosby's guidelines. I'm going to click on this is the administrative guidelines that the administration would go to, and I'm going to click on this one right here, breach of chain of command protocol. Now, what this says is these are the examples bringing a problem to district level supervisor that could have been directly addressed at the building or site level, or encouraging others to do so. And I might add, as a mentor to y'all, if you want to take this, one of the things that I never liked being told to do as an elected board member was not talking to my constituents. That was a hard one for me. It was just a personal thing, and I think some of you can relate to that. So, but what we did agree to do with the superintendent is, as a team, we agreed that if an employee were to call us and skip a protocol, that we declared to that employee as a team that we would listen, but we would tell them before they said anything, what you're about to say to me, I have to declare to you, will be shared with the board president on behalf of all other board members, because they have a right to know what you're telling me. They're elected just like me, and they're representing their constituents, and it will be shared with the superintendent. Now go ahead and share what you have to share. This, and I feel comfortable telling you this, but you're an intellectual board, and a lot of times I don't really see certain board members even wanting to be a part of a team as an elected board member. And I'm very impressed, and I'm not being condescending. I'm enjoying myself interacting with you here. So on this one, failing to follow established grievance channels, requesting that a higher level supervisor overrule an operational decision by a lower level supervisor, specifically member Jeter Freeman. Look down here at the commentary that I will read. It says, consistent with board whistleblower protection policies, and here's where it gets so neat, because we tell you what those are, and or related administrative guidelines. One, it is the responsibility of an employee who is aware of conduct on the part of any board member or employee that possibly violates federal, state, or board policy to call this conduct to the attention of his or her immediate supervisor. There's no, it doesn't say think about doing it. The statute and revised statute says we will do that. In addition, it says if the employee's immediate supervisor is not responsive, or is the employee whose behavior is in question, and their member Jeter Freeman is exactly what I'm interpreting you were referencing. And that is, if I have a concern with my supervisor, I should be allowed to breach protocol. Would you agree with me, madam?
Yes.
Yes.
And that's what our commentary has included there in the guidelines.
Thank you.
All right. And that goes for the other one that you referenced as well. Well, maybe not. Let me go down to, I think that other one was, what was it? It was
13.
Yeah, 13.
Let's read 13. I will report actions that may represent violations of federal laws, state laws, board policies, related regulations, and operating procedures. And I think you said, Member Jeter Freeman, that we need to say who those actions are reported to.
I was asking, do we need to?
So it would probably be the same, the immediate supervisor, unless that's the person that you feel is violating, and then
Okay.
you could go, I would think, is that what we're thinking?
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think it just, it clarifies that particular item. I think, again, I like the idea. What does the board think?
Yeah. Clarify.
Yeah, just clarification.
So we just
Okay.
add that.
We would just add that.
So, Dr. Cosby, would you be so kind as to take a note there for number 13?
I got it. Yes.
You are so efficient. Thank you, ma'am. All right. Does anyone else, as they're reading through these, see any kind of wordings? And by the way, this is going to be a fluid document. So anytime you want to change something, you want to add something, we're not going to charge you. This is part of your online support. You just go through the process, however you get the word to us. You don't have to approve changes necessarily in open meeting unless it's totally contrary to the board policies that give us the authority, that gives Dr. Cosby the authority to direct her administrators to hold everyone accountable to your policies. And then you would make those changes there. But in most instances, all you have to do is get like the change that you just asked for, Member Jeter Freeman, to say to the board, maybe in a study session, because this is a personnel issue for all personnel. Can we add this to the code? And then it will add it. If you give permission. I yield back.
Thank you.
Now, if I may, before we go, before I yield, President Moore, why don't I just show them real quick how those 3 levels within the code are concatenated into a consistently applied approach. These 3 levels right here. So if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So because we're kind of changing here, Mr. Scarce said, and I appreciate it. You made my job a lot easier this morning, sir, by the way you did that, because it just tells me a lot of boards would not have trusted their superintendent to make those decisions based on their existing policies. So let's say one of you I'm going to go back to the table of contents here. And let's say there's been a violation. If you'll look up on the screen, do you want me to go back to insubordination as an example?
That's fine.
Okay. I'm going to say there's a violation. I'm going to go back to the dashboard as the principal, but before I do, I'm going to log out here because it's been idle too long and it took me back out. And I want to log back in. It knows my ID and password. Your administrators and cabinet are going to click on employee conduct. They're going to click on regulatory compliance, and then it's going to show Trotwood-Madison administrative guidelines on their dashboard. I've got all these other school districts showing because I need access to them. But if you look right here, we're going to go down here to decision support rubric. Now, this is a research-based rubric that doesn't give you the right answer. It gives you a recommendation based on the landmark decision of Douglas versus the Veterans Administration as recommended by the U.S. Supreme Court and the Federal Labor Relations Board in 1981. This is the law of the land if you're dealing with a contract employee. So we would put the employee's first and last name on this rubric. We would put in the years of experience. We would establish the guidelines by clicking and going to the administrative guidelines very quickly, but we've already done that. We would determine the code violation, the preponderance of evidence after an investigation has been completed in accordance with our leadership requirements and due process steps that are required in the negotiated agreement. We would notify the union representative of any negotiated steps of knowledge as we're doing fact finding. And let's say we have decided that there's a preponderance of evidence to charge the employee with insubordination. Then we would put the violation date in. We would tell the system how many times this has occurred in the past. That is documented, not coaching, but documented on a progressive discipline sliding step scale from oral warning, memorialized acknowledgement, a written warning as prior, a official reprimand, a suspension. We would look in the files. How many documents are still on file that are in effect? Many of the master agreements, the negotiated agreements, have expiration dates on those documents. And if they're expired, we can't use them as a prior occasion. Let's say it's the first occurrence, the first time this concern has been acknowledged by the supervisor. I see here that in Dr. Cosby's guidelines, and these weights can be changed too by the administration. And these weights are changed based on your ethical beliefs and philosophies, Mr. Scarce. I know that Dr. Cosby is telling me I can issue an acknowledged verbal warning for a first occurrence insubordination charge. I can consider issuing a written warning or an official reprimand, but that's all dependent on my weighted scores after my investigation on the rubric of Douglas versus the Veterans Administration. So now I want to collapse these into the most fair, reasonable, thoughtful, and consistent recommendation for a first occurrence insubordination charge. What would that be? So what we've done, what Dr. Cosby has done based on our belief system and weights, she has said, you're not going to suspend an employee for a first occurrence insubordination charge in our district. You're not going to terminate an employee for a first occurrence insubordination charge. If you want to recommend that, it's going to have to be a much more egregious violation for the first occurrence in order to get there. And we're not going to yield to personal beliefs of administration in order to be fair and reasonable. We're going to follow controlled steps that are thoughtful and considerate of the aggravating and mitigating circumstances. So there's a Likert scale. A 0 means, and I'll use this is the Likert scale. It's kind of small on the screen. A 0 means that I can't apply any kind of aggravating point value to the statement, which is a derivative of the Douglas factor ruling at the federal level to understand the aggravating and mitigating factors before we start recommending a contract altering event of an employee. A 1 means that I weakly agree with the statement. A 2 means that I somewhat agree. A 3 means that I reasonably agree. And a 4 means that I definitely agree. So this incident represents a specific violation of the employee code. Well, if it doesn't, then I can't add any aggravating points to that. But if it does, and they've signed receipt for the code electronically, let's say by required reading through Public School Works, that would be a 4, because the employee, in accordance with the Douglas factors, they are telling us you can't hold an employee accountable to any policy, statute, or federal guideline unless you first tell them it's a requirement. The second one, this incident can be linked to the employee's position, duties, or job responsibilities. This incident had a direct impact on campus safety, school climate, or the interests of the school district. This incident was engaged in maliciously, intentionally, for gain, or on more than one occasion. The employee functions in a supervisory, fiduciary, or other prominent role. This employee's position requires significant contact with external stakeholders and/or the public. A past disciplinary action that was written and acknowledged and is still in effect on similar grounds is in the file, either the supervisor's informal file or the official personnel file. A past disciplinary is still in effect on dissimilar grounds. The incident involved has either received significant public attention or is likely to impact the reputation of the school or district. Prior to the incident, the employee acknowledged reading, understanding, or agreeing to abide by the district employee code, employee handbook, and or the department handbook. Now, we're just testing this. I'm just going to put some scores there, and they would be based on my investigation results. System, and this is a prior proprietary copywritten system, would analyze the weight value on a Likert scale. I know every one of you from your backgrounds know what I mean by Likert scale. 19 aggravating points for an alleged first occurrence of an insubordination charge. And then we have to look at mitigating factors, and that's what Dr. Cosby was referencing. A person can be tardy, but we don't necessarily need to charge them for being tardy if they have a mitigated reason why they were tardy. I had that happen to me one time. I was about to go downtown Phoenix. We had several, several dozens of superintendents paid to spend 3 days with us here in Phoenix doing our training session on this very subject. And an hour before I was to leave, my daughter, who was staying with us because she was pregnant and her husband was serving in Afghanistan as a Marine, hollered to me and said, "Oh, Dad, you got to take me to the hospital. My water just broke." She's 8.5 months pregnant. I immediately, on the way to the hospital, called my business partner and said, "You got to get down there. You got to be there." Now, had I not have done that, it would have turned a mitigated reason for not being there into an aggravating reason by not taking care of business. Same way with a teacher. Unless I'm dead and can't get to a phone, I ought to be able to call ahead and say, "I'm not going to be in my first period class. I'm late. I need coverage from me." That's a mitigating circumstance. So if I score these, the employer's term of service was not sufficient to provide the experience needed to foresee and avoid this incident. The employee's work history does not reveal any documented performance concerns. A physical illness or mental disability that the employees told me about, cognitive impairment, might be a mitigated reason. A personal problem, family issue, or similar life stressor might be a mitigating a reason. Unusual job circumstances, tension and pressure, harassment, bad faith, malice, provocation from others. This incident should have little or no impact on the employee's ability to effectively perform his or her assigned duties. Let's say the grounds for the charge is sexual misconduct with one of the students. I would say that one's it's gonna have a lot of impact. It's not going to be mitigated. Remediation of the conduct or performance deficit that this represents is realistic. In this case, disciplinary action in this case should result in behavioral suppression, and disciplinary action in this case should reinforce behavioral suppression with other employees. I'm going to put some scores in here just to show you how this works. Based on the results of the investigation. So we now have an aggravating point total of 19 plus 19 and a mitigating point total of negative 19. This is combined with this, and the formula that we've created at Upslope that's proprietary tells us that we have +6 aggravating points to consider when deciding if this violation is going to be issued a verbal warning, a written warning, or an official reprimand for a first ever occurrence. And the system recommends, based on the scores, it says you shouldn't give a verbal warning. It says you should give a written warning. That's an informal, self-remediable growth opportunity. And then once these are approved by Dr. Cosby and your school board attorney, we will put the templates in here for a written warning, and we'll go get the form that the administration will have before them, and it'll look like this. Luke, make sure that you tell me they can see this because I'm going to a Word file. Can they see this?
Yeah.
Written warning?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So these will be macro enabled and everybody will use the same format, and these need to be approved by your school board attorney so that we'll put them in the way they want it written. And these informal documents are the documents we would use as administration. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I'm sorry, Norman. I had something to say. Dr. Braswell, I want to make sure that the board can have some closing questions. I know that they're real pressed on the time today. So we have
And
about,
I'm
yeah.
done.
Yeah, okay.
How's that?
Okay, thank you. We appreciate that.
I'm very comfortable being told what to do, especially by ladies.
Yeah, I just want to make sure if anybody has any closing questions that they have for Dr. Braswell.
Not necessarily a question, but a statement rather. On the 15 points, and I can only speak for myself, I would not personally be in agreement with signing off on those, only because any employee per policy has a right to request a meeting with the Board of Education. And that might be in lieu of, or in response to some sort of, disciplinary investigation. Our philosophy says that when necessary, we can take jurisdiction over, as the board, any disciplinary action. And I would prefer to stay neutral just in case any of that would ever happen. So while I completely understand, the need to get this information out, I would support it. I can't say I would sign it, just because from my perspective, since these are already what this board has approved, for me, that would have to be signature enough.
Yes, intellectually, I don't think that signing off on the 15 guidelines, which are backed up by your existing board policies, as you're referencing, would prevent you from implementing that philosophy of anyone can come to you. It's just simply saying that you are acknowledging an open meeting. I'm sorry, there's so much background noise, I can't. It's simply saying that in open meeting, we're all in agreement that this is the kind of expected behaviors we're looking for. And if one of those prevents them from going directly to you, as long as that's your policy, then, or your regulation, and it's not contrary to existing negotiated agreement, that's your policy and that's the way it will work. And
Would this be considered an open meeting?
Say again?
This would be considered an open meeting, correct?
You're just signing off on distribution. It would say at the bottom of it, member scarce, that you are approving the 15 statements, whatever they end up being, for distribution to all employees.
Per your statements as a board member, speaking for myself only, Dr. Cosby, you have my full support. This is an open meeting that is being recorded and will be documented. And that's kind of where I stand.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I have one.
Yeah, can you speak in the microphone,
I
please?
have one. It's just a real minor thing. I don't even know if it's important enough to spend any time on statement number 1. At the very end of the statement, it says until fulfillment. And I was wondering if the word until should even be considered to be changed to the word through. I think that, to me, that would reflect more accurately what would be expected. But like I say, it's real minor. It may not make a difference at all.
No, I can make that change.
Dr. Cosby, Madam President, may I, because I didn't, Member Andrews, I didn't fully hear it and I don't need to, but Dr. Cosby, did you get that?
I got it. And
Yeah.
yes, and I'll let you know.
I yield back.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Ms. Jeter Freeman?
I don't think I have anything else. The scoring sheet that we saw at the end, I'm sure that the employees we would let them know that this is the new scoring sheet so that they are aware that this would automatically, and I think the only other caveat to all of it is the principals and their management style and how they manage, and that is consistent throughout the buildings. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Vice President Bozeman?
I do not have any comments.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent?
No, thank you, Dr. Braswell, for getting up so early in the morning to come spend this time with us. I think we did learn a lot, and, you know, like I said, the primary goal is to acknowledge that support. And I just want to say quickly, being in the pandemic since I've been here, we have not had an opportunity to each individually meet and talk and do those things that the board is looking at me like, well, you should know. And we just haven't had a chance to confirm that. I look forward to doing it. I look forward to it.
And we will be doing that very soon, okay?
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I'm gonna ask the board to look on their calendars for October, okay? For a board superintendent retreat, so that we can back up the clock,
Good to know.
okay?
Yeah.
And go from there. Ms. Allen, is there anything that you would like to comment on? Okay, great. Okay, well, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Braswell, for being here this morning on your Arizona time. That really means a lot to us because we started at 9, you started at 6 a.m. Thank you. Thank you for also listening to the concerns and the voices of our board, because I sent you those profiles and bios for a reason. Now you understand why, right?
I do, ma'am, and
Okay.
I'm so glad you did.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
may I just say thank you so much for spending your time with me. I am truly honored, and I hope you felt like it was a good use of your time. And I really enjoy the intellectual discussions and even, you know, making changes. That was my goal this morning, was to give you the opportunity to see what she's proposing operationally and make comments on that. Thank you so much on behalf of the board, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. You're more than welcome, and it's our pleasure. Also, I would like to thank our guests for joining us today. We have the president of the Trotwood-Madison union, teacher union, and that is Miss Angela Bruno, who has been here with us throughout the retreat. So again, I want to say thank you for joining us. I hope that you were able to glean some information on how this board works in a board workshop, because this is truly board work. So again, also, I would just like to thank our tech people for being here. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Alan. We couldn't have done this without you. We appreciate the setup. I know Mr. Howard is not here, but again, just making sure that this board is up and running, it means so much to us. And board, thank you for taking 3 hours out of your life today to be here to do this work. And by the way, this is our first open meeting since the pandemic. We shut down March 10th. And it feels good to be back on the DS and to be back in the district. And we're looking forward to more of that, not just as a board, but as a school community with each and every student and teachers and administrators and all those that are a part of our community family. Given that, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Not everybody at once. Not everybody at once. I just need one motion to adjourn. Okay, and I need a second. Okay, I got a motion, and I don't need a third, Mr. Andrews, but I got a motion, Mr. Scares, and I got a second.
Never been.
Here's my question. Are there any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Being none, 11:59. Will you please call the roll, Ms. Allen?
Yes, Student Freeman.
Yes.
Mr. Scares.
Yes.
Mr. Andrews.
Yes.
Mrs. Bozeman.
Yes.
And Ms. Moore.
Yes, motion passes. Meeting adjourned.